Very good. Okay, let's go ahead and call this the meeting of the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 1 Committee to order. The time is 7 o'clock, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, roll call.
Mr. Henry Savigny.
Here.
Ms. Patty Goldberg, absent. Carol Alexander.
Here.
Vanessa Guerra.
Here.
Ben Puig.
Here.
Jose Castillo.
Here.
Arturo Garcia, present, sir. You have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. The next item on the agenda are the minutes, review of the minutes for the past meeting held on January 8th, 2019. I believe these have been shared with us before, but are also found in your packets. Are there any corrections, deletions, amendments to the minutes as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the motion should read to make a motion to make Zaragoza from the intersection of Water Street and Salinas and moving northward to Zaragoza and then moving eastward to Santa Ursula. I think that should cover it.
Okay, there's been a motion has been made to amend the motion made, found on page 3 of the minutes, that was made describing the area that would be a priority for the TERS board to be, amending the minutes to read a motion to make Water Street, Zaragoza.
Yeah, well, I guess trying to describe the route, it would be.
Oh, that's right. To make Water Street up to Zaragoza.
I guess it's that portion of Salinas.
Water Street goes east and west.
Yeah, it's, it would be Salinas from the intersection with Waters, right? The intersection of Water
Very
and
good.
Salinas, moving northward to its intersection with Zaragoza, and then moving along Zaragoza eastward to Santa Ursula.
A motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discuss? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Is this clear enough for everybody?
Yeah, well, in the future, they should put Zaragoza Street and Santa Ursula Avenue.
Yeah.
That should be a.
Correctly address the street's full name as street or avenue. Any other comments or sensing no other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Any other corrections to the minutes as presented? Sensing no other corrections,
Motion to approve minutes.
there's been a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Very good. Next, we go to the citizen comment portion of the agenda. Citizens are required to fill out a witness card and submit it to the chairperson of the designee no later than 7:15 p.m. and identify themselves before speaking. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. No more than 3 persons will be allowed to speak on any side of an issue. Should there be more than 3 people wishing to speak on a particular issue, they need to select not more than 3 representatives to speak for them, and the presiding officer may limit the public comments further in the interest of an orderly meeting. Speakers may not pass their minutes to any other speaker. Comments should be relevant to the city business and delivered in a professional manner. No derogatory remarks will be permitted. Next item on the agenda is 5, a discussion and possible action on any items related to the Downtown TERS Number 1 area tour held today, February 12, 2019. So I think we just completed a good night tour, which complemented very much the tour we took last month, but from a different perspective, walking into the zone, so to speak, from the city, what are government offices, which would be a good supply of downtown activity if it were more friendly in terms of encouraging people to move in a southerly direction. I'm proposing, in the interest of time, that we ask Carol Alexander to circulate to the board members the both routes that were taken the first time and the second time, and allow us to think about our thoughts and what we saw on this trip, and make those comments in writing, and then we'll collect them and process them so that we have commonalities. Those of us that talk about the width of sidewalks, talk about signage, talk about trees, and the lighting that was raised. I think all of that needs to be put in writing, but we can all mention them here right now. We're gonna come up with a list. Why not put it in writing, and then we can cut and paste and put it together. And I further think maybe we can circulate it to those individuals that have traveled with us on a volunteer basis, the citizens that have come along, quote unquote, for the ride, so that we can get their comments as well.
If I may add, Chairman, now that you have myself and Mr. Manuel de Luna assisting, if you'd like to email me or Manuel, we'll collect all those information, put them in a nice little report for the next meeting. We'll put a status report on the walking tour for the next agenda, next meeting.
I think that's a great idea. So Carol, can we depend on you to send out, why don't you send the message to this that you have for the tours to Arturo, and then he'll circulate it to the board members, and then we can circulate it. I'll forward it to Jose, other Pete, Julian, et cetera, and then we'll make comments to this at the proper locations. This basically is a brain teaser to remind us of what we did, and then we'll make comments to this.
Do you want some questions?
Yeah, you can add questions to that. Feel free. Whatever you think will help make this a more participatory comment. However, I don't want to abridge the opportunity to make comments about tonight's tour. I didn't want to create a list. I want to write the list and send it in, but I think we should discuss the tour in general. And we'll then like to open the floor to any comments any of the board members may have. Ben, why don't I put you on the spot and begin with you?
The comments as
Any
far as
comments you might have about today's tour?
We could use this as a...
Well, I mean, it was kind of like Carol pointed out, the connections or lack thereof from pedestrians from one spot to another. You know, you go on Juarez and there's absolutely nothing, and then on Salinas it's also congested with no continuity with sidewalks or pedestrian routes. That was the big thing. And then the other thing is making these ADA accessible with all the riff-raff construction with people making their own little driveways and not necessarily permitted, or maybe they are. And so those are things that kind of caught my attention as far as the walkability of it.
I agree. I mean, if you're going to do, for example, use a bike lane, and you create a bike lane to go from point A to point B for the purpose of a bike to travel, could you not also, when you're in the planning process, create a point A to point B for a pedestrian to walk, or a group of pedestrians to walk in a friendly manner so that they don't feel obstacles?
So it's just, the other thing is, you know, I pointed out some of the ADA issues, but the other issues are, you know, and it's a big one, is obstructions in sidewalks. And that is a huge economic factor if we want to make those, you know, like where somebody pointed out, look, there's nothing overhead here, but so maybe I don't know if we can do it everywhere in downtown, but at least maybe a main corridor.
And that was the idea that was brought up at the last meeting. So the board probably would be working, because we can't do the entire downtown area, there's just the monies aren't there from the church to do it even over a 30-year period.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea being what you just said, designating the corridors that we're going to tackle, so that those be the first that we work on.
So I didn't pay attention on Salinas. There was overhead in some parts, right? So the goal of having Salinas look like Iturbide, or that would be, maybe we focus kind of on that pedestrian corridor and do some of those things. The other thing was lighting that was brought up. You know, there's different lighting situations. There's some that it's a softer white, and there's some that's a bright white. We probably just need to be uniform and pick one that kind of best suits all of the needs. And the other thing would be is getting a uniform paver for all of downtown.
Yeah, you kind of get tired of the various. Something simple, even if it's plain and simple.
I would think that Public Works would have a mountain of pavers in their yard ready to go. Whenever there's like when they break up a street to put in the water line or something, they always have the same paper coming. Like on the shelf. Nothing's, no stamped concrete, no. So.
I think, could I just add to
Yeah.
that? Like y'all mentioned those connected corridors, that would be nice if they were like, if you mentioned connected corridors that are connecting you to places and making those places like place making to where you're like, oh, I'm gonna get to this destination, I'm gonna, I don't know, take a hashtag of that photo, and that's where people share that downtown thing, that theme that you're walking, I know 3 blocks later, I'm gonna get to this one spot and it's clear. I know if I go a block over, there might be those obstructions, but I probably choose to walk on this one because I can see down the way. And then with that, connecting those places, those spaces with our transportation, whether it be a bike lane that intersects perpendicular or the, the trolley that goes around town and maybe this route that we're talking about. There's opportunities to go, for people walking spaces and bikes, and then running that corridor perpendicular, so that way you have I jump on this route and then it takes me 10 blocks over and then I can ride my bike down that way. It kind of gives you, downtown Laredo is small enough to where you can get spaces, but it's kind of, you're obstructed by every other light and then the one-ways. So if we had these connected corridors, it might give us a little bit more opportunity, connect the corridors maybe to a park. We have these 3 plazas, how do we connect that with a trolley and just 2 dedicated, maybe?
And that's more or less what we've discussed. That's along the alley. Could you state your name just for, I know that.
Jason Hinojosa. I'm a local, I'm from Laredo, and then I just returned recently.
Thank you, Jason. Any other comments from board members or non-board members?
Henry, for me, it may not be directly tourist, but the facades, code enforcement is standardizing what could be acceptable or permissible, or what's not permissible. Actually, is probably the better way. There's all kinds of fronts, all kinds of repairs on those fronts. I think that'd be important. Maybe a policy issue, may not be a place where you invest as a tourist, but it does have an impact. Where you put the canopies, if you put lights and someone puts a canopy, they've just destroyed the illumination on that strip. So those are some things that I walked right by some, it's not graffiti, but it was something on a building right on a screen, and it just doesn't fit, it just looks terrible. And I walked right by it.
We saw that right now?
Yes.
Can you say your name for the record, sir?
Jose Ceballos.
And I think that's true. We talked about this at the last meeting as well. Not that subject in particular, but something that may not be directly tourist related, but would encourage downtown, facilitate development downtown, and that's a vacant building policy, know?
Right.
So I think the board does need to have a series of recommendations that are policy related. They would say we need to have a vacant building policy, a facade policy, remodeled facade policy, etc. And as has been pointed out before, maybe even because facades are private sector owned, and the money at this point, because it's clear in the guidelines of the TERS, we cannot use public funds for private sector projects. But if we come up with a good plan that's related to facade development that we could share with a private sector individual who's working on their facade, then we could go to council and ask for an exception in that piece. That's a good point. Any other observations? Carol, you've walked it 4 times already.
I walk it a lot.
You developed it, you wrote it, you walked it, you timed it.
I'm just glad that we went out there and to see, and I appreciate your comment on what we're trying to do, and I did appreciate the lady that stopped Arturo in front of the bus stop to
Yeah, her comments were interesting, and
What were the more valid comments?
her main one was
Grocery store.
to try and get a grocery store. Of course, that's private sector.
And there's been several attempts by the private sector, actually the owner of the property where the old Danny's used to be at across from the courthouse. He's been attempting to attract one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's been trying hard, but there's really no interest right now by it. And it's all related to
Housing.
Housing.
Yeah, so, today I was in a restaurant downtown and they ran out of lettuce. So one of the guys had to, it was like, run and get the lettuce, where am I gonna get the lettuce? And there is a little grocery on Convent, it's a little one, but they ran there and they didn't have any lettuce. And so they had to, go get the car and the lettuce.
And then she mentioned the skateboard park.
A skateboard park.
She also said something interesting, the interactivity between the trash can, and she joked about it, but it's true.
Did they have those in Mexico City?
That's what she said.
Have you seen?
What do they do?
I'm not familiar with it. It claps.
No,
and it throws.
I think they have like, it's like a mechanical design, and when you put the trash, it does that like a flap, but it seems like interactivity, as opposed to just having an old trash can.
Like a-
I've seen those.
Encourage you to throw your.
So that was
Yes.
another thing on the walk was trash, and I guess, I don't know
The lack of it, or that you saw trash? 'Cause I was pleased with, we went to large parts.
well, I
that were
mean, it
trash
wasn't
free.
like you weren't running over it, but there was,
Yeah,
it was there.
yeah,
So-
that plate of food on the ground was obvious.
And so I know trash cans, I mean, and I don't know the city operations as far as, someone mentioned they pick up trash there every day?
Every morning they do a full cleanup.
I used to work in San Antonio, that was my prior job. We worked at the River Authority, that's where I worked, and so we were designing the river walk downtown, second river walk, which is San Pedro Creek. And in that design, something that we made adamant that we really enjoyed about the river walk was the ambassadors that we have there. You normally see them in yellow. Most time people think that they're just picking up trash, and that's one of their main functions, but they're also there to direct people on when you have questions and if you...
Wayfinding.
Correct.
So they're volunteers?
They work with the city, but the city works with other organizations that have need for volunteer bases and kind of getting people re-employed and giving them like leadership opportunities to man a crew or, kind of.
But they're not city employees technically,
Correct.
right? But so, that, to answer your
So they work
question,
with the workforce development.
but there's money for that.
But, well, I know this is off
Yeah.
topic, but is there some kind of business district
So
or district that
The San Antonio River Foundation works in partnership with that whole district, and so they'll lead a lot of that charge. It's nonprofit 501c, so they work.
The discussion falls under the top.
Yeah, the San Antonio created the River Authority to do this, and it overlaps, actually, that particular authority overlaps with the downtown TERS. So there's a Houston Street TERS, which overlaps with this
And
one.
how's that funded?
The TERS is funded the same way.
No,
No, that's a tax. There's a tax on your tax bill related to the river.
And just that community is taxed for that?
No,
Or
it's a citywide tax.
Citywide.
Anybody
Everybody
inside the
pays.
river basin.
Yeah, pays for that.
So it's like a
But-
business district.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of the ambassador, but then the TERS mentioned, they're doing it on Houston Street, and that's the whole dedication to their IT as well. And so I've been on an IT tour on Houston Street that takes you to like the rack space, and you go to Geekdom, and you kind of have a beer and walk around, and they're opening up these spaces for you to go explore and then kind of feel at home. And so they were doing a lot of those, kind of, y'all talked about this tour. I didn't know about that, but we joke about doing our own tours downtown and with our friends, but I didn't know y'all had that, and so kind of, these are all molding together, and it seems like y'all are in the right direction. And so something like this, like that tour that where you can get into these spaces.
Like you're talking about the tour we just did? So it's not, the tour was for the board to
Okay.
get familiar
That's what I was-
with it. No, not, yeah, it's not the kind you're talking about, although the kind you're talking about is a good idea. And so certainly developing the downtown area is a layered approach. Sometimes we always think that one thing is going to be the deal that makes everything work. And I'll bring up the recent most deal in the conference center and the discussion, well, the conference center won't do it alone. Well, guess what? The Hemisphere Park didn't convert downtown San Antonio to downtown San Antonio. It took years after the Hemisphere Park was up. And when they did the downtown mall, everybody thought that's going to bring on, and it took years before more occurred. And it was a layered approach. You did a layer here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and then together it began to raise the tide. And that's why we shouldn't be looking at any one project to be that magic bullet that's going to make it work. It's going to be a layered approach. trees, walkability. Then you convince universities. I mean, we have the college here. Another secret to downtown development is education and moving education facilities downtown. It's not. San Antonio asked UTSA to open a downtown campus for a purpose, because successful downtown areas in other cities had university campuses on them. What's happened now is that it's worked out so well for UTSA, they're going to be doubling or tripling the size of their downtown campus. And it's already fairly large. And we have a college right here, you know? So, you know, so that I think, you know, all of this is layer, that this is what I'm talking about, layer. And it all adds to it.
I like that really theme of, from the whole theme of it, when I came back into town, I said, you know, Laredo working on this downtown is a good thing for Laredo. Same thing, it's not the silver bullet for Laredo as far as activity, but any good city has that downtown, and it changes the dynamics when people come in from out of town, family, you say, oh, we can go to this downtown, or we can go to the downtown. Oh, what does downtown have? It's all these things, and it's a continually evolving thing. And it's exciting. I don't know if you hear the excitement in here right now, but there's a lot that, at least that we talk about amongst our friends, and everybody's like, oh, see that place. And
another good example are the downtown theaters. So you had old empty building theaters that were downtown. The Majestic was a project taken on. Oh my God, why am I forgetting her name now? But it's going to come to me in a second. But you know, this family, in particular the matriarch of the family, that took on the Majestic project, and she fundraised for it, and she renovated it with private sector. It was a public sector, private sector deal, but a lot of it was private sector money. And it was so successful, she then went around the corner and also took on the Empire. So if you've ever been into the Majestic or the Empire, those are magnificent examples of another layer of downtown. Why downtown started coming back in San Antonio was because the theater area was redeveloped. You know, that's what we're looking at here. Convincing the college to do something, another private sector person to take on a project and build housing, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But we need to start somewhere, and this is part of it.
Are y'all including like STR, short-term rental, any of that language in this, where Airbnbs are acceptable, or ADUs, accessory dwelling units in the back of these housings, to kind of spur up the living in downtown and opportunities to kind of venture?
Well, we're not limiting them.
Oh, well, I'm just.
A lot of people
But we're not directly addressing it for this reason, because the TERS is specifically made for 80% of the funding has to go towards streetscape. So we can go to the board, the council, and maybe petition for tweaking and changes here. But until then, we have our marching orders, and part of it is to connect downtown's various areas. And so one of the things specifically mentioned is connecting the outlets to San Agustin, so that when someone's at the downtown area, you feel, let me walk down that way because it makes sense, and I want to go to the outlet mall, because right now you look down that street and it's not like looking down on Iturbide and saying, let me go down Iturbide. When you look down Zaragoza, you're like, no, let's not go down Zaragoza. You know, so the idea is to do streetscape. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that everybody kind of keep their notes together so that when we do get the consultant, we have your notes fresh to be able to discuss them with them once we hire somebody on board, so you can kind of reminisce about, you don't have to repeat this whole process again.
And we're going to be sharing our notes with you all as well, so that you can put them together. I just wanted to take the opportunity, not to have taken the tour, but just to recap anything that was fresh in anybody's mind. If you wanted to say anything, are there any other comments? Sensing no other discussion, then what we'll be doing is, Carol will do us the favor of putting together an email with the appropriate attachment, send it to Arturo, who will forward it to the TERS members, and then we can forward it to those individuals, those citizens that walked with us that we know, and they'll make comments, and then we'll return it to you. Carol, you have a question?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Even though you already went past that. I think as a board, we have the responsibility to look at this, or consider, or to answer the question, how does the private sector fit in regarding the sustainability of the improvements that the TERS will build? So our board will build things, but
Yes.
where is, we might consider what the private sector is willing, and of course, we have some private sector
Right.
people here, which is what it's gonna take. Because once we plant the tree, the city can't be expected to maintain what our backyard, so to speak. So the sustainability of the improvements might be considered. And there are, so like you say, there are layers of groups out there working to do that. And what, like you said, the business district, or the districts that provide people and monies to sustain what gets built is important, I think, to consider going forward.
I agree. I think make sure that that's an underlined question in what you send to us, so that we do consider private sector participation, how we envision private sector participation. One of the more obvious ones that has already been mentioned is facade improvement, where that could be a combination, but there's more than just that.
And security, increased security that maybe is funded on the private end, and the, what is it, power washing facilities.
That's good. No, that's good. Very good. Any other comments, questions? Sensing none, are there any announcements? When is our next meeting scheduled for? March 2nd Tuesday?
Do we know what time the next meeting is?
It's back to 2:30.
2:30.
The second Tuesday is March 12th.
March 12th.
Second Tuesday, March 12th,
Very good.
at 2:30.
Sensing no other discussion, do I hear a motion that we adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
For the board, there are meals there for you if you'd like to take with you.